The FIFA Club World Cup kicks off today. Inter Miami will play Al Ahly of Egypt. And finally, after a few years of waiting, we get to see if this is going to be a debacle or a good time. I personally am very excited for this. I'm going to bring you some daily content over the next month to just kind of review and see what happens and hopefully find some of the interesting storylines. So welcome to Campfire Football. I'm Sebastian North. In this first video, we are basically going to just preview the tournament. Now, I'm going to quickly go through all of the groups and teams, tell you who I think will advance out of the group stage, and then we'll get into some of the off-pitch stuff because, there's a lot of drama there. All right, let's start with the groups. Group A, we have Al Ahly, Inter Miami, Palmeiras, and Porto. Now, look, this is a really interesting group because the European team in this is not a massive heavy hitter. And the other teams, I don't really know what the difference is between them. Inter Miami obviously have Lionel Messi. Al Ahly are a dominant side in Africa and Egypt. So it'll be interesting to see how they do against royalty like Palmeiras from Brazil. Porto are going to have their work cut out for them in all of these matches. Now, I personally think they and Palmeiras will be the ones to go through, but it's really hard to know what's going to happen in all of these matches. And that is a theme we will see throughout the rest of the groups. All right, moving on to Group B. This one is interesting because Atletico de Madrid and PSG are both in this group, along with Botafogo and the Seattle Sounders. Now, PSG and Atletico de Madrid will play each other in the first round of group games. That's pretty huge because the loser will immediately be under a whole ton of pressure. I actually think Atletico de Madrid have a real chance of going out. So let's just say PSG and Botafogo go through. All right, let's move on to Group C. We've got Auckland City, Bayern Munich, Benfica, and Boca Juniors. Now, Boca Juniors are an iconic club, and I actually think they'll do quite well. I think they and Bayern Munich will go through, and we will see Benfica get knocked out. All right, Group D, Chelsea, Esperance de Tunis, Flamengo, and LAFC. I know right there you see it says Leon. There's a whole story surrounding them. I'll get into that a little bit later. Being a Chelsea fan, I have to say I'm obviously a little bit nervous for this group, but I do think they will go through along with Flamengo. Group E is where I think we will have a massive upset and a major team crash out. Inter Milan have lost Simone Inzaghi as their manager. They lost the Scudetto on the last day. They lost the Champions League final 5-0. It's tough times for Inter Milan, and they're kind of in a rebuild phase, and I don't know if now is the best time for them to be in a tournament like this. On top of that, they play against River Plate, Monterrey, and Urawa Reds. Now, I think Urawa Reds are going to be the whipping boys of this group, but Monterrey and River Plate, I mean, that match is going to be a hell of a lot of fun to watch. So look out for the good stuff in Group B. I think that one's going to be very interesting. Moving on to Group F, Borussia Dortmund, Fluminense, Mamelodi Sundowns, and Ulsan. Mamelodi, there are a lot of people who are going to be paying attention to them. There's going to be a lot of stories about them. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they play. I still think Fluminense and Dortmund will be the two strongest teams in this group. Let's go to Group G. Al Ain, Juventus, Man City, and Wydad. I think this is the most cut and dry of all of them. Juve and Man City are going to be way too strong and will advance. And then let's go to Group H. Al Hilal, probably one of the most stacked teams in the Saudi Pro League, but they have Pachuca, Real Madrid, and Salzburg. Real Madrid, they have a massive pull, so they're very important for this tournament. They are the only club to have actually sold out all of their group stage tickets so far. And look, Pachuca are going to have good crowds as well because, well, they're a Mexican team, and Mexican teams are very well followed in the U.S. So this group, I see Pachuca and Real Madrid going through, and then once we get to the knockout stages, we'll recap and take a look. Okay, so now let's move on to the stuff that's on the outside of the white lines. This tournament has been shrouded in negativity, apathy, and controversy basically since the moment it was announced by Gianni Infantino. Now look, most people have called this a giant FIFA money grab, and I understand because of the fact that Saudi Arabia have such a strong money role in this. Saudi Arabia, they own DAZN, that is the streaming platform that will be broadcasting the games. They outbid nobody for the $1 billion to get the rights to this, which is kind of crazy. And then about 2 weeks later, they were awarded the 2034 World Cup. So clearly some deals were going on in the background, and it just kind of makes the whole thing look a little bit gross. The next thing is Gianni Infantino. as a person. A lot of people really don't like him. He is now seen more and more frequently as a self-involved and arrogant guy who is just trying to be the emperor of world football. I mean, he has his own token for the tournament. His name is on the trophy. He was hanging out in the Oval Office with Trump using the key to make the trophy sort of open up. I mean, the whole thing from him has been a little bit ridiculous. The way he has spoken about this tournament in such a glowing light, basically telling everyone it's going to be the most amazing thing in the world, does make a lot of people go, okay, buddy, actually, though, is this going to be any good? So what are some of the other complaints people have had? Well, obviously, the issue of the calendar. More matches, another competition, big players don't get rest, and apparently that's a really, really bad thing. Now, the whole player welfare thing is something I think is a little more complicated. I think too many people just kind of complain about it and say, oh, there's more games than ever before. Not entirely. And really, the question is, does that really matter? And the players, they get a nice bonus just for playing in it, and especially if they do well. So the incentive structure is there for this to at least be a pretty decent event. The problem is, will it actually look like that? I say this because the next big problem is the attendances and the ticket prices. We all heard that the cheapest ticket for the opening match originally was somewhere in the neighborhood of $500, and now they're selling them for $50. We've also heard stories of tickets being sold in giant bunches to college kids for $5 or $10 a piece. Essentially, aside from Real Madrid games, there's a real issue with how many people are going to be attending these games and how many tickets have actually been sold. Now, I don't think that's going to be a problem for FIFA in terms of going bankrupt because of it, because essentially Saudi is bankrolling this whole thing. But it's a really bad look to have games being played at, say, MetLife Stadium, which is 80,000 people, where you can only imagine it being 10 to 20% full. But I just don't see how they're going to come anywhere close to 50% capacity in those games. And there are a few other venues and matches that will be like that. That is going to be a really rough look for FIFA in the group stage. What I think they're hoping is that the knockout rounds are way more exciting, way more packed, and then when the tournament ends, that's the lasting memory. But no, we're going to remember how empty some of these stadiums are, and it's partially because ticket prices were so high. So one of the other things that makes this tournament a little bit of a joke is the selection process, how teams actually got in. Now, Red Bull Salzburg have not even been to a Champions League quarterfinal, but because they qualify for the Champions League every year and sometimes get out of the group stage, they got a nice coefficient and are there ahead of Arsenal. I mean, that's the part that makes this weird. Another story is Leon, because they have a crossover of their ownership group with Pachuca, which that's already a wild story. So essentially, Leon were booted, they appealed, that was rejected, and so Club America and LAFC played a one-off match to see who would qualify. LAFC won, so now they're in. Obviously, Inter Miami winning the Supporters Shield, not MLS Cup, means that they're in. Clearly, the reason is Messi, but these are the kinds of things that really hurt the legitimacy of the tournament. If they do have another edition of this in 2029, the qualification process is going to have to be a lot clearer to people. How do you get into this? It shouldn't just be because you're pals with Infantino and maybe you're willing to grease the wheels and make a deal. Okay, now that's all the negative stuff. I just want to touch on a few positive things here. One thing you remember is that the Eurocentric coverage of this tournament has been very negative. Most people have been saying basically, no one needs this tournament, no one cares, this is useless, get it out of here. But if you were to ask Esperance de Tunis fans or Mamelodi Sundowns fans or Urawa fans, they'll actually tell you they're pretty excited for this because never do they get the chance to test themselves not only against the big elite from Europe, but just against other teams from other parts of the world. There are a lot of bragging rights on the table here, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how everyone competes. I'm sure we'll see some upsets. We are going to be introduced to a whole bunch of players and clubs that we otherwise didn't know. The stories are going to be rich, so I'm very excited for that. So in just a few hours is the opening match, and I will check back in with you all tomorrow, and we'll just keep updating on the daily. So thanks for stopping by. I'm Sebastian North. This is Campfire Football. Take it easy.